to you. Hey, we're back. We're live again. Sorry about that. We had a blooper. If you're old enough to remember what radio was, then you remember what it was like when the DJ would play a record and it would skip, and he would be out taking a smoke break, literally probably smoking herb, sitting around doing nothing and drinking booze because he was on the midnight shift, and all of a sudden you'd hear Stairway to Heaven, and he'd be, and she's by, and she's by, and she's by, and she's by. And then he would come in and go, oh, hey. And they would hit this little button that said, the DJ has made an error. The DJ has royally screwed up, and blah, blah, blah. And it was a big joke they'd make out of it. I'm making a joke out of it. For some reason, we just got cut off there. I apologize for that. We're back. We're live. That's Miguel Literati. I'm Chadillac. I'm your host. Miguel's your co-host. And we are talking about the AEW and the WWE. So let's take off where we left off at, Miguel. Listen, I'm a novice about this WWE, AEW stuff. You were telling me about the idea that the AEW has a tag team that claim to be the best in the world. And what I was saying when we got cut off was what we were talking about was the idea that the WWE retorted with, you're a bunch of nobodies on YouTube, which is the dumbest claim that anybody could make if they know anything about technology and about the way that real entertainment works today. And it shows to me that the WWE may actually be the dinosaur that's dying, and they may be becoming extinct. And the reason that they may be becoming extinct, and look, I'm sure that they have things put in place for this, but it doesn't make any difference. If you're second place and somebody else gets there first, and all of a sudden you have 6 million viewers that are watching you just on YouTube, you've got 20 million followers on your Twitter account, and the WWE has 500,000 or whatever, I don't know real numbers on it, but just suggesting that, then the WWE is going to look like a Johnny-come-lately on this. And that's going to really hurt them, especially with the wrestling public that's starving for something new. So we were comparing the model of the WWE to the UFC and the AEW to Bellator. We were kind of making a comparison of those two models. And with Bellator, we've said over and over again, well, it really doesn't work, but it's starting to work for Bellator because, Bellator, they jumped on streaming before the UFC did. Bellator wasn't doing anything with pay-per-view. And so they went, look, we're losing on pay-per-view, but we're owned by Viacom. We've got far more money than the UFC could ever even dream of when it comes right down to it. Let's put a little muscle into it, and let's make a jump at this. And they're making a jump, and it's starting to have an effect because you're starting to see Bellator cards that are actually worth watching. And dare I say, people might even pay pay-per-view for them, except pay-per-view's dead. The WWE depends on pay-per-view plus people showing up at their stadiums. Go from there, Miguel, and tell me where we're at.
Yeah, but they have the same pay-per-view as the UFC, which is on their own network. So they're always on it. You got to have, then they're on free TV as well. It is an older model, and that's kind of what the wrestlers are sailing at. And what's happening here, the Bellator comparison doesn't really work because they are completely different sports and or business presentations. So the motivation of the athletes is completely different. You know what I mean? The bottom line is a 40-year-old fighter, to go to Bellator for a couple of fights and grab a contract, and even though they put you in main events and stuff like that, yeah, that might be a good way to go out. If you're a 40-year-old, you still got 10 good years to go in the business in pro wrestling, and you want to go somewhere where they're going to give you a fresh presentation and stuff like that. So, that's about as far as the comparison goes. Is number 2 chipping away one way or another at number 1.
Okay.
And AEW,
that makes sense.
So the way these things came about is, AEW's got their story on it, and their story is a nice, presentable package. The bottom line is I don't know if you know Dave Meltzer by name. Do you know Dave Meltzer? Okay, Dave
No.
Meltzer he's the pro wrestling guy. Like when Andre the Giant dies, and you get a talking head talking about pro wrestling expert, talking about Andre the Giant on Sports Illustrated or in a place. That's Dave Meltzer. He's the guy. He has a underground sheet where he reports on the business end of pro wrestling and stuff like that.
Okay.
He's the elite guy, and basically, Cody Rhodes left the WWE under bad circumstances. They dressed him up with, makeup and stuff like that, and forced him to do a character that he played balls to the wall, but didn't want to do. And
what was that?
Like a crazy, like I believe I'm from outer space type character, painted in makeup and acting crazy, like silver makeup.
The lightning bolt and the.
There were many different makeup configurations, but similar to his brother and stuff like that.
He was at the show that I was at.
Okay, but the thing about it, the thing that doesn't get recognized here, and I think Dustin Rhodes said it in an interview, and I'm sure other people say it, is that Cody Rhodes, for the modern era, was a spectacular wrestler. Like you talked about The Miz, he was every bit on the level of The Miz. He's every bit on the level of many of their frontline guys. He's a much better.
Tell me what that means before we go any further. Because honest to God, I don't know what a spectacular wrestler means.
So you do have to have a moveset. You know what I mean? The bottom line is you have your character, and your character may sell, and that gets you to a certain level. Like Hulk Hogan is not a spectacular wrestler. Hulk Hogan was a character, and Hulk Hogan had a leg drop, and you run into his big foot when he came at you, and maybe a clothesline. Very limited set of moves, though. He'd body slam you and stuff like that, but he was not a technical wrestler that you would see doing arm drags and things like that. And there is certain chops that you do that does earn you respect in the wrestling business. It is where they come from. That's a Josh Barnett. What the value of that is you have to know moves. You have to know it. Roman Reigns gets accused of that nowadays. To me, the fakest move in wrestling is the spear. I mean, the whole thing is fake and stuff like that. But
the spear,
his finishing move, which is basically a tackle. I'm sorry, I watch NFL players get up 50 times every weekend from that same move. Don't believe, and get up and go play. So I don't believe it's a finishing maneuver. But
I don't just explain what the spear is.
It's a football tackle, straight on football tackle. You throw the guy against the rope, and you wait for the guy to get up, and then you run at him and tackle him. They use it for limited wrestlers. Goldberg's finishing move was the spear. Bobby Lashley's finishing move is the spear, and Lashley's come a long way. It's also used for big guys and stuff like that. But again, the wrestlers that use it, it's like you don't need to teach them that move, right? So in the business, this stuff is also very important,
Okay.
Because that's the pedigree of where they come from. And Cody Rhodes is a spectacular wrestler.
And that why we're starting to see some of these smaller wrestlers, like what's his name with the jeans and the T-shirt that was crazy? Who are we talking about? What was his name?
John Moxley. Yeah, John Moxley.
What was it before that?
Dean Ambrose.
Dean Ambrose. Yeah. So Dean Ambrose, which is what I know him as because he was there the night that I took my son to see it. He was clearly he had a far better ability to move about the ring and to climb the ropes and to jump around and do things.
He's a spectacular wrestler. He's a spectacular wrestler. The thing with him is it comes down to creative. I sent you a clip, and I don't know if you got a chance to see it or
I did not.
I sent you a clip of the exchange of the promos that Moxley did for AEW, and it's just something about the tone that he put into it too. But the idea is he scripted it himself. So his promo basically, and with catchphrases that were really catchy, that he would not be allowed to use. He's handed a promo in the WWE that he's got to read and learn like a script. Sometimes if he has to change it, he can't. So it really comes into some creative differences. I remember one of the lines he said in the promos. He goes, "Do you really want me for an enemy? I'm a guy that doesn't play well with others. I'm a guy that." Forget what his list of things like that was, but the last one was, I'm a guy that doesn't necessarily care for the safety of the athletes. They don't care. So, but that is a little bit. You could see somebody in a mainstream, completely PE WWE world where they're aiming for PG and above now. They want your kid. They don't want you, right? So in that world, I might tell them to take some of those lines out of there. They're a little too edgy for me, you know?
Right,
And,
right.
you know, and go with a little bit of a different appeal. Stuff like that really chafes on guys. Because these guys live this wrestling stuff, you know?
So in some ways, Miguel, I'm comparing apples to oranges here because I'm comparing the UFC and Bellator to AEW and the WWE, when maybe I should be comparing this to Hollywood, independent versus corporate film. Corporate film says, no, the hero's got to win in the end. He's got to get the girl. The girl's got to be blonde, blue-eyed, and they have to kiss, but don't make the kiss too, no tongue.
Sure. No, I know what you mean.
Is that kind of the same thing that we're, Vince McMahon's aiming for? We want your family to keep coming to this. Whereas AEW is like, we're going to go edgy and punk rock, and we're going to go for metalheads. Is that what it is?
I don't think. I think on the creative end, they think that they can tell a story a little bit better, and that's what has legs. So far, so good. They've been incorporating and having interesting things. What they're set up now is, like I said, is Kenny Omega against Jon Moxley. At some point, now you've got Cody Rhodes against the guy that hit him with a chair, whose name is Sean Spears. You're expecting to dispatch Spears, and Spears goes into the rotation at some point, but they'll drag that feud out. So the stories are starting to develop already. They've already got, in the future of stories of fighters, if they were able, and to go on your comparison here, it's as if all the indie filmmakers now had a father sponsor. So in other words, I'm an indie filmmaker, and now I want to do this because it's anti-Hollywood, and King Kong wins in this one, or whatever it is, but whatever it is you want to do, now you've got the ability to be funded and to do what it is that you want. Because what AEW managed to turn into a dream is the following. This is so Cody Rhodes leaves the WWE and has a match against Kenny Omega in an independent match. And Omega's the guy, like I mentioned earlier, had turned down a WWE contract. And these dudes, like guys in the business, get to talking. They don't know each other. Or if they know each other, they haven't been around each other in years because one guy's been in Japan and the other guy's been in WWE. And they start talking philosophy and motivational, like young men do, dreamy kind of like, what if we could do it this way? What if we could, So the question actually, literally the story goes this way. And if it's this simple, it is a beautiful story, right? If it's crafted, it's still, you got to give them credit. So they put out a Twitter question to their fans. And that was, could they do an independent show with, Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega in this list of fighters and sell out a 10,000-seat arena?
And
enter David Meltzer, the journalist I was talking to you about, who, by the way, judged early UFCs on several occasions. He was the judge who I believe got the fight wrong that had Pedro Rizzo beating Mark Coleman, for example. I sat next to him during that fight. So I know Dave Meltzer from those days. Talked to him on a few occasions. He is very much a pro wrestling person and understood pancrase in the Japanese scene, which is why he was involved in the early days of UFC judging and stuff like that. But Meltzer right now, he is the pro wrestling sheet out there. He is on the pulse of the business. And Meltzer's response to the tweeter was, not anytime soon. And that caught fire, and that's the basics of it. That really caught fire because at that point, the Young Bucks said, I've got some people on our YouTube channel that watch they've had upwards of 100 episodes of what their show is, which I believe is called Being the Elite, So They always had their own stuff, and the Young Bucks are, you remember this from the early days of MMA. The Young Bucks are the kind of guys that would show up to wrestle in your town, and they would also put up a table and sell their shirts. And at the end of the night, you catch them at the table counting their shirts and inventorying and doing that kind of work and stuff. And the Young Bucks didn't want to come to WWE. They'd rather keep doing their own stuff. They felt they could almost make more money that way too. So all of a sudden, so in comes the backer, and the backer is the family of the owners of the Carolina Panthers and one of the soccer teams in England, one of the major soccer teams in England. So it's a billionaire family from Pakistan. The father figure is there. I forget his first name, but the son is in charge of the AEW aspect. Is Tony Khan, and I mean that's more money.
So the owner of the AEW. The AEW was an independent organization that just had a YouTube channel.
It's almost like this. It's like, hey, Vince,
and they
love football so much, just buy an NFL team. Stop trying to do another league. And Vince is actually involved in trying to launch the XFL again now and another league. So yeah, he's a guy who's got too much money and too much dreams on his hand, maybe. But again, now he's going up against an NFL owner, and that is a little bit of a different pedigree. So that brings it back to the Ted Turner days where at the top, the rival's there.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got, we've talked about a lot of different organizations and whether they've got legs or not over the last several podcasts that we've done on different subjects that weren't pro wrestling. These guys have legs.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a 3-year contract to be on TNT. So I say for the next 3 years, let's look and see what they deliver. And I believe that you're going to see, I mentioned with CM Punk. CM Punk was a guy that left the WWE and said, I'm not coming back. There was
Why?
Creative reasons. Exactly this. He sat down on a ring apron and shit all over Brock Lesnar and the part-time fighters, and how he was the best in the world and the whole thing, and that slowly led to him leaving. His wife left too, right? So now
was he?
When you consider box office and the show and the talk, CM Punk was a genius, and he's a genius to the point where you go to a WWE event now, and the crowd is not happy with the in-ring action. They will chant CM Punk as a reference to let the WWE know this sucks, basically.
Wow.
But here's the bottom line. It's been almost 10 years since CM Punk has even been in a WWE ring.
Seriously?
Look, he trained for UFC, so even if it's 5 years for people to still be chanting your name, you know what I mean? It's 5 years, 2014. When did he sign a UFC contract and spent a couple of years training for the fight, was injured and this, that, and the other stuff. But yeah, he hasn't been the length of time that people remember him. He's a crossover guy, and he'll be important for if the AEW can catch him. But I think it makes it interesting.
Okay, so is the AEW trying to catch CM Punk?
There are rumors. I don't know for sure. There are rumors, and CM Punk actually made a documented appearance at an independent show this year, where he showed up, fought with a mask or some type of hidden hint, but it was clearly him that made an appearance. And, those types of things mean something in the wrestling world. The interesting thing there is that Punk's wife was also a WWE wrestler, and she could also go into the AEW roster, and it would be very, very interesting. So Punk is the big name, but there are others. Ryback is another name. Luke Harper is another name. They already netted Chris Jericho, like I told you about Chris Jericho. Those are guys that have recently left the WWE because of specifically creative differences.
But Chris Jericho is officially going. Not only is he going to be, he's not just commentating; he's wrestling.
Oh yeah,
for the AEW now.
Yes,
that's enormous.
They actually. In a sign of respect. And again, when you're talking about Jericho going there, it almost means more in the wrestling business than it does outside of it. because Jericho's a huge name, but Jericho is an all-time Hall of Famer, and in the business, he's got a lot of respect too. You know, so when he goes over and he does that, it sends a huge message, and it also sends a lot of sign of stability for AEW. So yeah, Jericho becomes a very huge signing for me.
Okay, I'm gonna do something that's probably extremely unpopular here, but I have to do it. I'm a promoter first and foremost before I'm anything else.
Just really fast to finish up what I was saying about Jericho. They gave him a place of respect in his first match in AEW. He's got a pinfall win over Omega, and Omega is their star guy.
Oh, okay. So he went in, and his first session in, he beats their guy.
Yeah, and their guy now did a drive-by and beat up Moxley after the last show and stuff like that. And Moxley's been beating him up. So that's the program for the belt. And but the one-off with the bottom line is I think actually, what's the matter? Where'd you lose it? Now you got me. Now I'm interested. They do a drive-by, you know?
Jesus Christ. There's no okay. Hold on. Sorry. I'm sorry. The one thing that I have always been amazed about in pro wrestling is their inability to see their own stupidity, and nothing in pro wrestling is superfluous. Everything has some kind of drawn out meaning to it, and it is all. I mean, the ability to script something like they did a drive-by, or somebody beat somebody up in an ambulance, or that kind of stuff is so it's so outrageous and so bold that, goddamn, man, you got to give them some kind of credit for that. And I guess that's what
Batman show. It's camp.
Yeah, I guess that's what you're saying, right? Is that Vince McMahon has said, no, this is the Vince McMahon show. And I'm going to tell you what I was getting ready to talk about that's really unpopular. And it drove a lot of fighters out of my show, but it drove fighters out of my show that I didn't give a shit about because they weren't selling any tickets. So I wasn't concerned with a small local show, a regional show, about whether or not, because look, I could bring in every UFC scrap that there was back then easily. I mean, $500. I could have 50 UFC guys come in at $500 a piece and fight, and they would have begged me for the spot. I didn't want them because what do? They go in, they beat up one of my local guys. My local guy, who was a superstar, is now not selling any seats because he got beat up by a UFC guy. And they go, well, I guess he wasn't as big as we thought he was. Right? What the AEW is offering is what I wasn't offering my guys, which was this. They would say, well, I want to fight this guy, or I want to fight that guy. And I'd say, no, I don't want you to fight that guy, because if you fight that guy, we're going to lose ticket sales. We lose ticket sales. I don't buy Pampers. I don't pay my electric bill. I don't, drive a better car, blah, blah, blah. The same old shit. It's money. And whether it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in my case, or millions or even billions of dollars in Vince McMahon's case, it's still the same situation. It's about, no, we're going to do it this way because this is a cookie cutter program that I know works. And we're not going to take too many risks outside of it, even though I was known as the promoter to do things that nobody else did. Still, when it came down to it and they'd say, hey, I want to come out and I want to do this and this and this and this, I'd say, no, I really don't want to do that. And if they got mad at me about it, I'd say, hey, it's the Cadillac show, not the XYZ show. It's not the Tom show. It's the Cadillac show. And that's the way it's going to be. because I know what makes money. And at the end of the day, your little bit of money that you're going to make isn't in comparison to what I have to deal with, because I've got 20 other shows I've got to do this year. And so in that way, I sympathize with Vince McMahon, because he has to protect his brand. And so I sympathize with that. But at the same time, AEW is doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is we're going to take on the establishment, and we're going to be anti-establishment, and that's what's going to get us hits. And we're not only going to do that, but we're going to get hits in places that Vince McMahon hasn't explored yet, because we're going to do streaming. We're not going to worry about pay-per-view. We're going to go in a different route, and we're going to use technology to do something completely different. Am I accurate there in that, Miguel, or am I off?
No, I mean, superficially, there's comparisons that can be drawn, but you keep trying to tag it to MMA, and it's not MMA. It's a completely different presentation, because they can bring guys back after losses.
I'm not trying to tag it to MMA. I'm trying to tag it to promotions.
So no, and I understand that, but still, the enactment is their seeds are completely different than that of a smaller company. They kind of already had a lot of ideas and things, and it's that in the creative end where they think that they're going to do better. Maybe they won't, in terms of, at the end of the day, it still looks, to be a similar type of presentation. Wrestling will provide the gimmicks, but let me tell you, let's get back and we'll tie in another big name to the podcast too. So
yeah, because we were talking about CM Punk, right?
Part the whole CM Punk thing, part of the whole WWE's current problem, and they really made it bad for themselves this year, is Brock Lesnar, because Lesnar has a huge contract, and he only fights part-time, whereas the other guys are all forced into having these long, schedules and things. CM Punk fought 200 times a year and was watching belt matches go to Brock Lesnar, and he very much called out Brock Lesnar and stuff. And that may even be part of his psychological reason to go and get his butt kicked twice in UFC, was because he was going to prove that he could do what the other guy could do, like that. But that could very well be it. And Lesnar lost his belt this year, and there was amidst the rumors that he was coming back to UFC and stuff like that. Now, 40 years old, he comes back and says, nah, I'm not going to go to UFC. The signs again with WWE. WWE brings him back again to a part-time schedule where he interferes in a match and walks away with a contract where he can ask for a title shot at any time in a match that he was not even involved in at the very beginning. So he's completely privileged, and they don't know what it is. And again, you're talking about a guy who, for the last 3 years, the only thing he's done in the ring is the Suplex City German suplexes. He'll German suplex someone 6, 10 times, 15 times, depending on how much it is, and then go ahead and pin people. He doesn't have, again, so he's not even doing any wrestling moves. He's a complete package of presentation, and Vince keeps forcing him on guys when guys like Cody Rhodes and CM Punk and stuff have put into work and have gotten to be in the title picture and want their crack, and they're being turned, So this is part of the problem, and Vince doesn't appear to understand it or, as enough of a threat to change or to want to solve it. So it goes beyond just Brock Lesnar, but that is the embodiment of it.
Okay, here's my retort to that. Vince understands it very well, and he understands it because he's been in a situation where he's gone, oh shit, I might have just taken a risk where I'm going to lose my entire company. And he has been in that situation, correct?
I mean, he's played in loose with bodybuilding and football leagues and things like that.
Well, on top of that, the WWF at one point there was a skirmish between, was it the WCW? Is that what it was? I mean, there was a time when there was some real competition, and Vince kind of went, oh shit, and then he found a mold. And he found something that worked, and it was the Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, the Andre the Giant, and then hey, this is pay-per-view, and they did the first pay-per-view ever. I know that much about him. I know historically what I know about wrestling is very little. What I know about the business of wrestling is a little bit bigger. And what I can say about it is this: Vince is making absolutely the right moves because what he's doing is safe. I don't know if he has shareholders or not. I don't know how that works with I'm sure he does. I mean, at this point, he almost had to go pink with this, but at the same time, you're looking at a guy who answers to shareholders. He answers to his television contract. He answers to fans. He answers to mothers and fathers, which, by the way, the first time I took my son, most of you already know this, but my son has a disability from a traumatic brain injury from a car accident in 2010. And when we got there, they didn't have the right seats for us. And no matter what we did, we couldn't get the right seats. And finally, these two wonderful human beings came in and said, we're going to take care of this. And they took us into this empty bar and put us in these seats that were kind of okay, but they weren't the seats we paid for. And I only wrote the owner of the establishment, not Vince McMahon, obviously, but the owner of the facility wherein they had the WWE, and said, hey, this and this and this happened, and I want to recognize these people for taking care of it and doing the right thing. And for that, Mr. Ball sent me, he wanted to send a limousine and all kinds of stuff, which we turned down. We said, no, we don't accept that. But he put us on the turnbuckle. And so Vince McMahon did exactly what he was supposed to be doing, because that is, there's some kind of clause, there's some kind of contract anywhere he goes that says, we take care of bullshit. And if something happens, you'll be compensated. Don't worry. Take care of it. Family first. And he's a family first organization. And because of that, even though it's blood and guts and all of that stuff, he made blood and guts family friendly, right? And so by doing that, you got to give the guy credit. I think he's the greatest promoter of all time. I think second is Don King. And then after that, probably me. But
well, let me tell you this. At the same,
go ahead.
All that being said and done, there's a time and a place for everybody. And his time, he's an older man. He's in the 70s at this point, and his time may be done. And it may be simple as that cycle playing itself out. Every lion, has to cede his pride at some point. And AEW may come along at the right time. If they fail, it may be the next group that'll do it. But somebody will do it there, because McMahon isn't going to be there forever. As what you said, once you've targeted the children and that part of the audience, you do give up a certain edginess and stuff like that. And every chief executive, every boss, everybody there operates with a certain percentage of people who are disgruntled. They don't like them. They don't this, that, or the other thing or like that. But what McMahon has done over the last couple of years by acting with impunity, especially with the Brock Lesnar example, but he's pissed off a great deal of his talent, now to the point where there is an exodus of his talent and stuff there. And that's where I'm not sure that he's been trying to correct it. So we're going to see how that plays out. But these guys all know each other. They all compare each other. And that's where the moves, the pedigree, that my father was doing this, and we, know about the transition from the old days to the new days better because I did it as a family. I know my kid, Dusty Rhodes, was a major booker for the NWA and their storylines and stuff like that. And those are the traditional old pro wrestling storylines, like the one about the Midnight Rider I was telling you about. You know what I mean?
Right, which is fantastic.
And it may very well be that situation where the WWE, because Dusty presented a different type of talent, a different type of storytelling, he never went over well with them. He was certainly never in their title picture, right? So
listen.
Here was an iconic guy that the WWE never swallowed from day one. They were always operating sort of in a different way. And now his son sort of wants to try to carry on the tradition. And in the conversations with other guys in the business that are good, that you could actually see, we just don't have the money. And boom, in walks a Tony Khan with his billions and says, now you do. So, hey, they're all going for it. And there is that feel of all in for it. And it's exciting. It's exciting.
And hey, Miguel, nobody knows better than you that big money can come in and change the complexity of everything, and it can still fail miserably. Right?
Yep. I mean, and the AEW is
not to
guys
not to
that
be
are
an
grounded
asshole,
enough.
but
I mean,
you know,
put it this way: go out. Just if you get an evening that you're not doing anything, go out and watch all their YouTube and build up stuff for this recent show where they documented stuff. They're like, and some of it might even be scripted because it's almost such traditional show stories. And this is where everything you said about MMA completely applies. A show story is a show story. So, for example, a video of the Young Bucks sitting outside and Kenny Omega's pacing in front of him on a phone, like frantic on a phone. And one of the Young Bucks comes up to the camera and goes, "They've lost our luggage. They don't have their outfits." You know what I mean? But it's like, and yes, but they don't have their outfits, and it's like, how are they gonna dress them up? And Kenny's working on getting guys and stuff like that.
Oh my God.
But you gotta give them credit. So it is traditional pro wrestling junk. You know what I mean? It's like they're not straying into, too far off territory, but the way it's delivered is fresh. They're younger guys, and now the Young Bucks, they're gonna have to change their nickname at some point. They've been around 10 years, but
and hey, Miguel, at some point, sorry to interrupt, but we're running long here, and I want to nail this in. There's nothing that can be more important, really, for this league as far as I'm concerned, because what's the one name we've heard over and over again?
Vince
for the AEW.
Cody Rhodes.
I mean, no, not of the women. Who's the star?
Oh, Nyla Rose.
That's new. That's big. That's new. That's progressive. That's moving towards a trend that's not going away. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It is going to
turn some people off, though, and it's interesting because there
very few.
Well, you know the type of and this is strictly operating in stereotypes for the conversation, right? But your stereotype rednecky white pro wrestling fan may not be totally up on the LGBTQ stuff. It's going to be something different.
I think they're going to buy into it because, I mean, you even alluded to it earlier that I hope I don't get this wrong. Dusty Rhodes' son was
Cody.
He kind of
Dustin. Yeah,
he kind of swung back and forth between that sort of. I think he did glitter or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that
and
right?
And he would if he could get a moment and get his opponent face to face, he might give him a kiss and little touches like that. It is a PG show, but
so
it had
I don't think
innuendo.
I don't think for a second that you're going to see hardcore wrestling fans that are going to be turned off by that. I think they're going to absolutely drive to that. And on top of that, you're going to have people who are of my ilk, which is the far left liberals, who are going to say, "What's about time?"
Well, let me tell you this: Nyla Rose she's Native American and was born a man and has transitioned to a woman and now competes as a woman. Now, in her interviews and stuff, she talks about, as we've stated, how she feels that she represents two communities, the Indian aspect of her background, and then and I don't mean to use Indian as offensive, but and then the LGBTQ aspect of her, and
right.
She's also smart and well spoken. She's talked about how transgender athletes have popped up in pro wrestling in Mexico and in other areas in the past where there are wrestling traditions. So she's not the first in the world or anything like that. But in America, she's in the spot. What I appreciate about it is that AEW isn't in your face with it. She's presented as a woman. They present her as the beast, and she's bigger and stronger than everybody else. But they never look at the camera and go, "Oh, by the way," or there's no hint or anything like that. And I think that's the right way to present it. In my book, I'd really like for you to watch the presentation and stuff. And in respect to that, her two matches, they've been exemplary of things that the AEW have done correctly. Rather than bring her along as just this huge monster, they put her in a couple of predicaments, okay? So they put her in a three-way match. So basically, she would have to deal with two fighters, right? And in their first match under the AEW flag, she's got two girls.
Time out.
Yeah.
When you talk about a three-way match, you have to educate me on that because I don't know what that means.
It's just a three-way free-for-all. You pin.
Does that mean two people are taking on Nyla Rose, or does that mean they're all taking on each other?
They're all taking on each other.
Okay.
But the two will probably team up, and that's inevitably what happens. Trying to get rid of the big one. That's the typical pro wrestling storyline. In their first appearance, they had two girls, both good wrestlers and stuff, facing Nyla Rose, and they threw a surprise fourth person in there, and they brought in the legendary Awesome Kong. Awesome Kong is a woman who's bigger than Nyla Rose. Naturally a bigger woman. She's now in her 40s, but she's a pro wrestler from the. I saw her run on TNA, and she's a dominant and an awesome woman as far as just anything in athletics and stuff. But she's now 40, but she's bigger than Nyla Rose. So they had
Nyla Rose is massive.
Yeah, but no, this other girl, Nyla Rose is probably 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. And
is that all? Man, she looks huge.
Because when I compared her
because she's
to Awesome Kong, Awesome Kong was noticeably a little bit bigger and stronger and stuff. Awesome Kong is slow, and because she's a woman naturally now in her 40s, I think her wrestling is not what it once was, but it had the effect in the match, and the winner was one of the other girls, not Nyla Rose. So now in this last presentation, this last weekend, go watch this fight because they got two girls. Girls from Japan to come in and fight her. And this is everything that's great about Japanese pro wrestling because
actual Japanese girls,
actual two Japanese studs from the pro wrestling world over there.
I mean, from our experience,
like bringing Yabushita and Namachan.
They're so tiny.
Yes, two girls fought there, and the basics of it were these girls come from a world where in Japan their show is to take a beating. And I don't mean
this disrespectfully. I really don't. But I can't help but picture in the movie Nacho Libre when Jack Black is out there, who's only 5'5", and he's about 240 pounds. He's a little short, fat guy like me. But he takes on these two little monsters in monkey masks, and they bite him and beat the living hell out of him, and I can't help.
The world of Japanese pro wrestling can get weird,
I've watched it because of Josh Barnett.
Piranha fish in aquariums where people are put into it. From there on, stuff like that. So
why didn't I do all of this when I still promoted? I'm an idiot.
You're not number 3. You're not number 3. You're at least number 4. So at any rate, but they bring in these two girls, and these girls take a beating against Nyla Rose. I mean, they take some bumps. If you want to see bumps, watch this show. And at the end, it's a choreographed pro wrestling move, but it's such a shock ending because the Japanese girl is in one of Nyla's her clutches, and she's about to pull off a move, and she kind of lands on her feet, wraps her up, 1, 2, 3, it's over, and she's gone.
Gotcha.
And it's just great. It's great, and that's a pro from Japan. That's what you get when you bring in the Japanese. So I think AEW, by bringing in by bringing access to the Japanese scene, is giving us a real good variety of what the worldwide wrestling scene is there. And I think, how do you find competition for someone like Nyla Rose? You got to go international. You got to bring in some pros like that. And it was a great fight. The ending left, you can see the crowd react. And that's what you want at the end, So go watch the fight. And in that one, the girl took a bump. She went up for a suplex. Nyla Rose has the girl. At one point, she suplexed them both, right? But she does one of them up, the real skinny one, for a suplex. And she drapes her across the top rope, but she's supposedly so out. She's kind of holding herself on there, but she's draped across the top rope. Nyla Rose has her goes up to the top turnbuckle here and drops a freaking leg across the top of her and sends her flying across the ring. That's a bump. You want to see a bump? There one. Go look at that.
That's not a bump. That's death.
Yeah,
But
and the Japanese was like, "Sure, put me on the rope. Don't worry, don't worry." Yeah,
Miguel,
that's the attitude they bring. So
we're gonna have to pull some strings. We're gonna have to start reaching out. We're gonna have to bring some guests on. We know that. We've been talking about that. And one of the guests we've got to bring on and just talk about not MMA, which I would love to talk about MMA with him, but I've talked about MMA so much with Josh that we burn it out. And we talk about metal so much, we can't talk about metal anymore. But I only skimmed the surface of Japanese pro wrestling with Josh Barnett. And we need to reach out and use our influence and our ability that of all the people we know over the last 25 years in MMA. And we need to talk to Josh, and who has fought for you and done work with you and everything else. And I've been privileged to be around him a lot. And we need to have Josh come on the show sometime and actually talk about Japanese wrestling so we can get a perspective on the difference between what that is and what American pro wrestling is, because they are vastly different. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that the AEW is something like a crossbreed between Japanese wrestling and the WWE, and they've gone back to this, using smaller people. Everybody's not roided out, but they're more able to do things because they're more flexible, they're faster. And
look at the acrobatics of the Young Bucks. What they do is definitely something that's not been done in WWE. There've been athletic guys and guys with move sets and aerial moves and stuff like that, but not with the depth of maneuvering and like I said, it's choreography is what it is more than anything.
Yeah.
But it is fun to watch. It definitely is. It's the kind of stuff like me. I was like, these guys. Let's see what these guys really do, and they can call themselves the number one guys in the world. And after I saw a couple of their matches, I was like, I won't say they're not. It's like because if somebody says I'm the best, and you look at it and you're like, you're not even close, it right away. And I could not discount them as the best guys that I've seen in a while.
My final wrestling story, and we'll wrap this up, is I as an undergraduate at IU, I had a professor there. He was adjunct. Sykes, Eric Sykes was his name, Professor Sykes. Brilliant man. He did his PhD on stereotypes and prejudice, which taught me an enormous amount about stereotypes and prejudice that I had no idea that I even contained. And we can talk about that at another time. But he at one point was invited to go, and he was from New York. He picked up a job at IU, and not just IU, but IU Kokomo. So it was a satellite branch of IU. And I took this class with him and loved the class. But he went to a local wrestling show where they dropped people on light bulbs and all kinds of, the staplers, the tacks, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And, he said, I walked in there with my button-up shirt, and he's a little, bald. He's a little short guy like me and stocky, and everybody's bald, and he's clearly an intellectual. And, he walks in there with his button-up Oxford shirt, and, he comes walking in there in his Dockers, and everybody else is wearing wrestling shirts that have the sleeves cut off, and, they probably had, Budweiser, it was kind of that era, and that kind of thing going on. And he said, the first thing I did was I was so uncomfortable that I unbuttoned 2 buttons on my shirt. And that says everything you need to know about wrestling. And I think from there, I have a lot to learn about it, because I've been missing something. And,
all right, then I'm going to ask
you these last few segments that we've done have shown me something really interesting, and I'm genuinely way more interested than I used to be.
Now, here's another thing, and I'm going to give you one thing that you must do his homework, and I'm going to force you to do it, and I'm going to bitch to you about it afterwards, okay? But this is a starter document. This is a starter documentary on what makes these guys. And the bottom line is the dedication the men put into it, the fighters, the women now, is there on the level of any black belt or anything like that. So they're dedicated to this. So therefore, you are seeing something advanced at its highest levels. Go watch the Andre documentary HBO did on Andre the Giant. You want to see something that'll captivate you completely about one of wrestling's greatest guys. And here you're talking about a guy that because of his size and stuff, he never had an anonymous. He can't put on a ball cap and go to the mall. You know what I mean? Brad Pitt might be able to get away with that, sunglasses and, this, that, and the other stuff. Andre the Giant never had anonymity, ever in his life. Start with that. So now you got to be Andre the Giant to everybody every day of your life. Go watch the documentary. It's amazing.
That's a done deal. I'll watch that tonight. It's called Andre the Giant, the documentary.
Yeah, it's HBO 2018.
Okay, I'll check that out tonight. For sure, I will watch that.
All right.
I'll probably stay home and watch that instead of watching fireworks because I've seen enough fireworks for 20 lifetimes.
It's 10 times better than any fireworks show. You'll enjoy it. They have old footage of the guy. I mean, when he was young, you've never seen anything like that guy. That guy was unbelievable. Could you imagine if something like that had walked into you as a promoter? Just take that aspect into that documentary. They have his mother at home now in France, and she has a chair like this big across the back. She's like Andre's chair for when he came over.
Yeah. Somebody told me one time that when he went to Japan, a friend of mine who was really into wrestling read everything about wrestling he could read, and the Andre the Giant biography was part of it said that when he went to Japan, that the girls would flock to him, but then they would kind of run away because he was so impressive.
Yeah.
He was so endowed that they were like, no way we can do anything like that. And he also said that he had to go to the bathroom on the floor because the toilets were so small that he couldn't even use them. They were so small. And that tells you how huge that guy is.
That's the part of it that literally it's a nightmare life. And then because of his disease, his organs continue to grow. So he knows he's dead. Yeah. And he died at our age, So you're talking about a man with all
at 28.
No, 48. He was in his 40s.
At 28. Yeah, our age.
No, 48.
Oh, you are. Yeah, I know you're 20 years older than me, but
okay, I got you.
I understand. I understand you're an older man.
You're sexy. I got you. But yeah, so watch it. It's captivating. And then what
I'll do that tonight.
What goes into the show is real worth it. You know what I mean? So and that's the part of it that WWE. I have never left the pro wrestling world since watching it as a kid because it really is interesting. It really is great.
Hey, so listen, let's wrap this up, but let me ask the audience, please comment on this and tell me, I want everybody to plaster links on the bottom of this because we're on Facebook Live right now.
Did you see my pantless promo link?
No, I did not see that.
No,
but we have done. We have done shows. We have done shows with no pants on.
I'm going to send you. Yes, I'm going to send you a 3-minute link. I'm going to send you a 3-minute link, and this comes from the 70s Memphis wrestling. So consider it B plus class. But it's a great promo, and the fact is both guys are imitating Dusty Rhodes because Dusty Rhodes was such a fucking icon that people actually imitated him in their deliveries. And the thing is like you just gotta watch the promo. It's fantastic. With that, I'm starting off. But all pro wrestling.
Wait a minute. I stand by this. Anyone who wants to be elected, watch the Dusty Rhodes. What's it called, Miguel?
Hard Times.
Watch the Hard Times Dusty Rhodes delivery on YouTube. All you have to do is put your name in front of Dusty Rhodes and scratch Dusty Rhodes, put your name in it. Instead of talking about wrestling, talk about the working class man, and you're going to get elected, because that is the most amazing speech that I've ever heard a wrestler give. It's utterly exasperating. I loved every second of it. Hey, I loved every second of this one. Miguel, thanks for joining me on this, and we'll see you again next time. And everybody have a happy 4th of July, and go out and watch some WWE versus AEW, and let's check out wrestling. I'm starting to get really oddly interested.
You're going to enjoy the high points. The high points of the shows are complete for sales, and salesman jobs that you're going to love. So